The wind carried the scent of ripe grapes through the hills of Napa Valley, brushing against the wide-brimmed hat resting on Eleanor Wright's head. She stood on the porch of the estate house she had called home for the last 30 years, sipping coffee as the morning mist burned away in streaks of gold. The vineyard was her husband's legacy and now, entirely hers. 2 weeks had passed since the funeral. Charles Wright had been a man of vision and wealth, the founder of Silverthorne Cellars, a boutique wine label turned international luxury brand. He'd died with grace, just as he had lived, leaving behind a handwritten note and a sealed envelope addressed to Eleanor. She hadn't opened it yet. She wasn't ready. But this morning felt different. The quiet had grown too loud. The emptiness too sharp. Eleanor walked back inside and set her cup down on the counter. With steady fingers, she opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. Dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, I've gone ahead of you. You always were the brave one. I trust you'll manage everything well better than I ever could. There's something I never told you. About the land, about the shares, about the trust. You'll need to be careful. Trust your instinct, especially with Sebastian. Love always. Charles. Sebastian. Their son. The same son who had flown home immediately after the funeral. His designer luggage barely unpacked before he started asking about assets, balance sheets, and estate planning. Eleanor felt a cold chill settle beneath her ribs. Sebastian hadn't stayed just long enough to have dinner 3 times, wander the vineyard with a real estate drone, and meet with a financial advisor without telling her. She'd found out from Camille, the family's estate manager, who had overheard him on a phone call, pacing the pool deck with urgency in his voice. I'm telling you, it's undervalued, he'd said. The land alone could go for double with the right development partner. It wasn't grief she heard in his tone. It was ambition. The next morning, Eleanor walked into Charles's study, a room she had rarely entered while he was alive. The air smelled like cedar and old ink. His leather-bound journals lined the shelves, and a locked drawer sat beneath the desk. She tried the key Charles had always kept in his cufflink box. It clicked open. Inside, she found 3 things. A folder marked South Ridge Parcel, not public, a black flash drive, and a copy of a trust document she'd never seen before. Her name was on it. Yes, but so was Sebastian's. Not as a beneficiary. As a restricted party. She stared at the clause. Any attempt to alter or dissolve the primary trust without unanimous approval will result in full legal forfeiture of claim by Sebastian Wright, effective immediately. Her heart thudded. Why had Charles drafted this? That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked the rows of vines with the flashlight, the ground crisp beneath her boots. She stopped at the South Ridge, the oldest, most fertile section of the estate, the one Charles always protected. Now it made sense. Sebastian wanted to sell. But Charles had sealed it, and the trust was her shield. 2 days later, Sebastian returned. He hadn't called first. Just showed up, car rental still running in the driveway. Mom, he said, stepping into the foyer with his usual breezy confidence. Sorry for the surprise visit. But we have a lot to discuss. She offered him tea. He declined. It's about Silverthorne, he said, pulling out his iPad. I've run some numbers. If we subdivide the ridge and open a tasting lounge with a resort license, we could triple revenue in 2 years. I have 2 investors ready. Eleanor stayed silent. And, he prompted, and your father protected that land for a reason, she replied. Sebastian's smile faded. That was before. Things change. You can't hold on to sentiment forever. She stood. I'm not, she said. I'm holding on to integrity. He leaned forward, voice low. You don't understand the scale of what I'm offering. This is generational wealth. She reached into the drawer behind her, pulled out the trust copy, and placed it in front of him. He scanned it, slowly, and his face changed. All charm fell away. So that's it? You're just going to block me from my own inheritance? You did that yourself, Sebastian. He stared at her for a long moment, then left without another word. But she knew it wasn't over. because Sebastian never walked away empty-handed. And now, he knew what he was up against. That night, she backed up the flash drive, storing one copy in the wine cellar behind the 2005 vintages, and she called Camille. "I need you to check the south fence line tomorrow," she said, "and start logging any cars that come down the private road." Camille didn't ask why. She had worked with Charles for too long not to hear what Eleanor wasn't saying. Something was coming, and it wouldn't arrive at the front door. 2 days after Sebastian's silent departure, a new visitor arrived at the Vineyard unannounced, unexpected, and completely out of place. Eleanor saw the car first. A sleek black Audi Q5 creeping down the private gravel road like it didn't belong. It slowed at the gate, paused for an awkward beat, then drove up toward the estate house. Camille was already on her way out the side door, clipboard in hand. The man who stepped out of the SUV was in his 40s, lean, sharply dressed in a slate gray suit. He wore the kind of sunglasses that were either prescription or intimidation. "Miss Wright?" he called, stepping forward. "Apologies for the surprise. I'm Henry Langford. I represent a firm that recently spoke with your son." Sebastian's name was like a thorn these days. Eleanor didn't speak. She merely raised a brow. "He mentioned you might be open to exploring development opportunities, joint ventures, partial acquisitions, fractional investment partners." Camille made a quiet sound, almost a laugh. Eleanor gave the man a cool smile. "He mentioned that without my consent." Henry Langford adjusted his tie, trying to stay composed. "If I may just leave behind a proposal." "It's very preliminary." "Of course," she said, holding out her hand. He passed over a matte black folder, embossed with a logo she didn't recognize, Varden Strategies, LLC. "I'll review it," she said, "and let my legal counsel know." Langford nodded, already retreating. "Thank you for your time, Miss Wright." When he was gone, Camille spoke first. That man reeked of leveraged debt. Eleanor cracked a small grin. "And perfume." Back inside, she opened the folder. Inside, pitch decks, projections, land zoning estimates, a mock-up of a resort and private golf course overlaid on top of her vineyard. It was dressed up in glossy visuals and bullet points. But underneath it was clear. They wanted to gut the land. She called Patrick Rayleigh, the family lawyer. "How fast can you dig into Varden Strategies?" "Already on it," he replied. "They've got a few red flags. Shell companies in Miami, complaints in Reno. You want me to file a cease and desist?" "Not yet. Let's watch first." That evening, she opened the flash drive Charles had left behind. It took a moment to load. No password. Just a folder titled, "Ellie, keep if needed." Inside, dozens of scanned documents, legal correspondence, and a video file. She clicked on the video. It was Charles, filmed in his study. The lighting was dim, his face somber. "Ellie, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner, but I needed time to make it right. Sebastian's been trying to find loopholes in the estate for over a year now. He's been working with outside firms, some of them predatory. I've blocked as much as I could. But if he's pushing harder, it means he's getting desperate. You need to secure the South Ridge titles. Keep Camille close. And Ellie, don't trust anyone Sebastian sends." The video ended. The screen went black. Eleanor sat in silence for a long time. Sebastian hadn't just come back after the funeral with a new idea. He had come back with a plan. 3 nights later, a second car appeared. This one didn't stop at the gate. It bypassed it entirely by driving down the emergency tractor path, normally blocked by a gate. Someone had cut the padlock. Eleanor saw the headlights from her bedroom window. She didn't call the sheriff. She called Camille. Together, they grabbed flashlights and a pair of Charles's old shotguns from the barn safe. They walked toward the tractor path in silence, boots crunching over gravel. The car was parked halfway down, engine off, no one inside. They swept the rows. That's when Camille saw it, boot prints in the mud. 2 sets. They followed them past the irrigation well, up toward the southern boundary line. A small drone lay discarded in the grass, its camera broken, but the SD card still intact. They were scanning, Camille whispered. They're cataloging the land, Eleanor said. Mapping weaknesses. Access points. Probably planning an early move before probate concludes. Back at the house, Camille ran the card through her laptop. The footage showed a familiar face. Sebastian, walking the property in daylight, pointing to markers, talking to someone off camera, and laughing. Eleanor leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. It wasn't just ambition. It was betrayal, the kind that ran deep enough to cut through blood. She opened her eyes and turned to Camille. We're changing the locks. All of them. Camille nodded. And tomorrow, Eleanor added, I'm calling a private investigator. If my son wants war, I want his allies exposed. One by one. Camille reached for the landline. Let's get to work. The private investigator arrived the next morning. His name was Arlo Benton, former state police. Now a freelance intelligence contractor with the face of a retired cowboy and the mind of a chess player. He wore jeans, a pressed navy shirt, and carried an old leather bag slung over one shoulder like a doctor from another era. He shook Eleanor's hand with the firm grip of someone who'd once tackled suspects in back alleys. You've got a good setup out here, he said, glancing around the estate. Old wealth, tight perimeter, but too much faith in tradition. You want me to dig into your son and whoever's pulling his strings, I need full access. Eleanor nodded. You'll have it. Camille handed him a folder with the drone footage, the business card from Langford, and a copy of the Varden proposal. Varden Strategies is a front, Arlo said within minutes. They exist, yes, but they're just the tip. They pass contracts down through a maze of ghost partners until no one's name sticks. That's what people use when they want to bury responsibility. Eleanor didn't flinch. Then let's start digging up bodies. That night, Eleanor sat in her late husband's study, flipping through old ledgers. Charles had been meticulous. Every payment, every donor, every vendor recorded by hand before being scanned into the estate's digital archive. Halfway through the 2017 ledger, she found a note scrawled in pencil. S.W. Dueling Ridge backdoor access. Camille, check gate lock records. S.W. Her son's initials. But it was the second part that chilled her. Charles had suspected this for years. He'd even looped Camille into watching the perimeters. Why hadn't he told her? She called Camille into the study. Camille sat down beside her, eyes scanning the note. I thought he was being paranoid, she whispered. He asked me to keep a key log back then. I still have it. She pulled out a box from the storage close to, simple black binder labeled Security, Access. Inside, hundreds of entries, timestamps, vehicle types, motion alerts from driveway cameras. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she flipped to the 17th of August, 2017. Entry 3. Unauthorized activity. 2:18 a.m. White Lexus crossover. South Gate. No main entry. Her breath caught. Sebastian had visited while she and Charles were at the annual Wine Growers Conference in Oregon. He had come here in secret. Arlo's research came fast and steady. By the second day, he had a list of aliases used by Sebastian's associates, including shell companies owned by Langford and 3 other partners. One was flagged in a Department of Commerce investigation. They're targeting older estates, Arlo explained, spreading photos across the kitchen table. Widowed owners. Heirs with business school connections. It's a network, and your son's their foot in the door. Eleanor stared at the faces. One photo stood out, a woman in her 30s, red hair, green eyes. Arlo tapped it. That's Veronica Dale. Real estate manipulator. Used to work for Varden before she started her own firm. Your son had dinner with her 2 nights before Charles's funeral. Here in Napa? No, Arlo said. In Las Vegas. Eleanor's stomach turned. He was in Vegas before coming home? Arlo nodded. He wasn't flying in from New York like he told you. He was closing deals. And Veronica? She used to date Langford. Everything was tightening. On the 4th night, Camille found a burner phone in the barn. It was hidden in a grain bucket, wrapped in plastic. Its battery had died, but Arlo brought it back to life. The messages inside were simple, coded. Ridge clear. E not watching. Meet Sunday. V says push trust renegotiation. Sell her on retirement. She hates cities. Try Utah pitch. Eleanor stared at the words. Sell her on retirement. They were planning to wear her down. Make her doubt her age. Her strength. Her future. But they'd underestimated one thing. She had nothing left to lose, and she would rather burn the vineyard to the ground than let them steal it. The morning after discovering the burner phone, Eleanor woke to the scent of rain on the vineyard soil. The clouds had rolled in overnight, the sky a heavy blanket of gray that draped across the ridgelines. She took her coffee to the porch, watching the low fog curl around the vines like smoke. Camille joined her, a worn manila folder in hand. We mapped every camera blind spot yesterday, and the gate's been cut twice this week. They're testing us. Eleanor took a slow sip. Then it's time to test them back. At noon, Arlo arrived with news. They're prepping a hostile maneuver, he said, setting a laptop on the dining table. Veronica filed an LLC this morning, Napa Legacy Holdings. And guess what address she used as her base office? Camille leaned over. Sebastian's old apartment in Brooklyn? Arlo nodded. He's anchoring her operations. Probably as a shadow partner. They're trying to build a fake paper trail to claim rights to your land. Eleanor didn't flinch. Then let's give them something worth fighting over. She pulled out a map of the property. This ridgeline here, she said, drawing her finger across a stretch near the southern slope. It's off the books. Charles never logged it with the business filings, but he left it to me in the original prenup amendment. Separate from the winery. It's mine, free and clear. Camille's eyes widened. You think they're after this parcel specifically? They don't know it's off limits, Eleanor said. So let's make them try to take it. The trap took a week to prepare. They had a surveyor friend come mark false boundaries, enough to suggest a title dispute. Camille arranged for a landscaping crew to accidentally post signs that hinted at a potential sale. Eleanor called a distant cousin in the county clerk's office and filed a notice of intent to subdivide, a move that would ripple through development circles like wildfire. The bait was set. By Friday, Arlo confirmed Varden's servers had registered a new search alert. South Ridge, Wright Estate, per S subdivision. They're watching everything you file, he said. And they're reacting. Eleanor smiled. Good. Because the next move wouldn't come from them. It would come from her. That evening, Eleanor recorded a message. She sat in Charles's old chair, facing the camera head-on, her voice calm, her eyes steel. To those watching, she began, let me be clear. The Silverthorne estate is not for sale. My family's land is not a commodity to be sliced and sold to the highest bidder. And anyone who believes otherwise would be wise to look very carefully at their own paperwork before they speak in court. She paused. This vineyard is more than dirt and vines. It's our story, and no one rewrites it but me. She sent the video to Patrick, who distributed it strategically to a local reporter, a wine industry blog, and a private investor group known for pushing back against corporate encroachment. By Sunday, the internet had taken notice. Local headlines popped up. Silverthorne widow pushes back against developers and Wright family conflict goes public. Bloggers dissected the footage, praising Eleanor for standing her ground. The winery's sales spiked overnight. Orders flooded in from loyalists. It was a PR triumph. And a warning shot. Sebastian called that afternoon. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Mom, what the hell are you doing? Defending my home, she said evenly. You're humiliating me in public. You think airing family disputes online is noble? I think exposing predators is, she replied. There was a pause. Then, he said it. You're not in your right mind. You're grieving. And people are taking advantage of that, Patrick. Camille. Even this investigator. You're letting your paranoia turn you into a recluse. Eleanor inhaled slowly. Don't mistake clarity for paranoia, Sebastian. I don't want to fight you. But you already did, she said, her voice cold now. When you walked this land behind my back. When you laughed while planning how to divide it. When you sent strangers to my door pretending they were offering me help. He was silent. Don't call again unless it's through your lawyer, she added. You lost your seat at this table. And she hung up. That night, Camille found a GPS tracker under her truck. Arlo examined it. Military grade, he muttered. Somebody's funding these people beyond what a development firm should be able to afford. Eleanor clenched her jaw. It wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. Coordinated. Deep. She stared out the window, watching the moon rise over the ridge. They'd tried to push her out with whispers. Now they'd hear her roar. Rain returned to Napa like a long-held breath released. Heavy drops spattered against the estate house windows, blurring the vineyard into a field of shadows and silver. Inside, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table with Camille, Arlo, and Patrick on speakerphone. A stack of legal folders formed a wall beside her trust documentation, land titles, transaction logs, proof of everything they'd built, and everything they were now defending. They filed a preliminary injunction this morning, Patrick said from his office in San Francisco. Veronica, Dale, and Sebastian are formally contesting the trust structure. They're using the language of coercion, claiming Charles unduly influenced Eleanor to alter the documents before his death. Eleanor blinked slowly. They're saying I manipulated my own husband? They're painting it as a late-stage pressure play, Patrick replied. They're leaning hard into your age, your health, and your emotional state. I'm not senile, Eleanor snapped. No one's saying you are, Patrick assured. But they're hoping a judge will question whether you understood what you were signing. It's their only viable angle. Arlo crossed his arms. You want me to get ahead of this? Yes, Eleanor said. Expose everything. I'll trace every email, every wire transfer, every burner phone, Arlo promised. But I also think it's time we talk about the South Ridge Cave. Camille looked up, startled. You mean the old stone cellar? Arlo nodded. Sebastian mentioned it during a dinner meeting in Vegas. Said there were unregistered deeds down there, old title grants from the 1930s. If those get into the wrong hands, they could try to spin a heritage claim. Eleanor stood. Then we're going down there today. The stone cellar beneath the South Ridge was carved into the hillside. Charles had once called it the Vineyard's bones. Damp, cold, and filled with crates of ledgers, antique bottles, and sure Innova metal strongbox locked beneath a false floor. Camille dusted it off. Arlo picked the lock in 30 seconds. Inside, brittle paper sealed in wax. A handwritten deed, dated 1936. A transfer of ownership from a local land baron to a family friend and ancestor of Charles. The paper alone was worth thousands. But the content? It was gold. Because it proved that the South Ridge parcel had never been part of the original Vineyard Corporation. It had always been separate. Passed by private family line, never absorbed into the business trust. They can't touch it, Patrick said later, after reviewing photos. This wipes out half their argument. But they don't know that yet, Eleanor said slowly. Patrick paused. You want to let them proceed? Yes, she said. Let them show their hand. Let them lie. Let them drag my name through the mud. And when they dowen, they've committed it to the record we drop this in court. That night, Camille received an anonymous email. Subject: Check your loyalty. Attached, a grainy surveillance photo of Camille hugging Arlo behind the winery's truck barn. Eleanor read the message twice. The intent was clear. Sow division. Make her doubt Camille. Make Camille doubt herself. You think they're watching us that closely? Camille asked, voice shaking. Eleanor didn't answer. She walked across the room and opened the cabinet above the fireplace. From behind an old painting, she pulled out a second flash drive. One Charles had labeled only, "Cotton if needed." She plugged it in. Inside were folders labeled with names. Langford. Dale. S. Wright. Varden. Surveillance. Phone records. Charles hadn't just protected the estate. He had built a case. Eleanor exhaled. Charles knew this was coming. He just didn't think he'd be gone before it started. The next morning, Sebastian filed a restraining order, claimed emotional abuse, alleged manipulation of family assets. He even accused Eleanor of surveillance, claiming Arlo had harassed one of his associates. It was desperate, reckless, and it was exactly what they needed. Patrick filed the counterclaim the same day with the historical deed, the flash drive documents, and a sworn affidavit from the family notary, confirming Charles had updated the trust of his own volition. The judge scheduled an emergency hearing. Eleanor would get her day in court. But before that could happen, Arlo got a phone call. It was from a contact in Vegas. Veronica Dale's disappearing, the voice said. She's liquidating her assets and moving funds through an offshore account. If she vanishes, your son will have no legal cover. Eleanor stood very still. Track her, she said. And when she runs, make sure she leaves a trail. Because Eleanor Wright wasn't just defending her land anymore. She was dismantling a syndicate. And she had just taken the gloves off. The courthouse in downtown Napa was modest sandstone steps, ivy climbing up its columns, a small fountain burbling beside the main doors. But on the day of the hearing, it might as well have been the gates of a battlefield. Eleanor stepped out of Camille's car in a tailored navy suit. Her silver hair was pulled into a low chignon, her stride confident. Beside her, Arlo carried a briefcase filled with evidence. Camille followed with quiet strength. Patrick met them at the entrance. They'll be here, he said. Sebastian. Veronica. And their new counsel. Eleanor smiled. Let them come. Inside, the courtroom buzzed. Reporters sat in the back rows. A few members of the local wine board had shown up, uninvited. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Dana Leeds, entered briskly, and silence fell. Let's get to it, Judge Leeds said, flipping through her docket. Preliminary hearing regarding the Wright Estate Trust contestation. Plaintiff. Sebastian Wright. Defendant. Eleanor Wright. Sebastian stood. He wore a charcoal suit and an expression that tried for wounded but veered toward petulant. Veronica was seated beside him, impassive. Her new attorney, a man with slicked-back hair and a Mont Blanc pen, began, Your Honor, we contend that Mrs. Wright is not mentally fit to administer the estate. Furthermore, we assert that Charles Wright was unduly pressured into altering the trust in the months before his death, in ways that deviate significantly from the family's legacy and business trajectory. Judge Leeds raised an eyebrow. You're accusing a grieving widow of manipulating her husband into disinheriting his own son? That is the basis, yes. Patrick stood. Your Honor, we not only reject those claims, we have indisputable evidence to the contrary. He walked to the bench and handed over a USB. Contained within, a recorded testimony from Charles Wright, dated prior to his passing. Supporting documents detailing Sebastian Wright's meetings with known development fraudsters. A sealed deed proving that a key section of the estate South Ridgeye is privately owned by Mrs. Wright and outside the trust. Leeds plugged in the USB and began watching. Charles's voice filled the room. Calm. Direct. Heartbreaking. By the end of the 5-minute video, silence had settled over the courtroom. Sebastian's face had gone pale. Veronica shifted uncomfortably. Judge Leeds set the papers down. Plaintiff has 30 seconds to respond. Sebastian opened his mouth, then closed it. His lawyer tried to speak. Your Honor, this material is damning, Leeds cut in. You filed this claim under false pretenses, using manufactured allegations. I see no grounds to continue. She looked directly at Eleanor. Mrs. Wright, I'll be issuing a protective order shielding you from further legal harassment. You're to retain full control over the estate, and all claims by the plaintiff are dismissed with prejudice. Gavel. Bang. It was done. Outside, Sebastian approached her. He wasn't angry anymore. Just small. I thought it was mine, he whispered. The Vineyard. The future. I was supposed to lead it. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. You were supposed to protect it. She turned away. Weeks passed. Veronica fled the country. Federal agents froze her assets. Langford vanished from the grid. Varden Strategies folded. The media moved on. But the Vineyard didn't. It bloomed. That autumn, Eleanor hosted the first Silverthorne Heritage Gala in 10 years. Locals came. Industry veterans. Women in finance, farming, and law. Camille gave a speech. So did Arlo. Then Eleanor took the stage. I was told once that I should retire, she began. That I was too old. Too emotional. Too traditional to survive. She held up a glass of her husband's 2008 Merlot Reserve. They were right about one thing. I am traditional. I believe in legacy. And I believe you protect what's sacred, not because it's profitable, but because it's yours. A standing ovation followed. And as the music played into the evening, Eleanor stood beneath the stars, surrounded by vines and the people she trusted. She had lost her son to greed, but she had reclaimed everything else. The Vineyard, her name, her future, and no one would ever try to take it again.